We are streaming live right now. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll be starting within a few minutes. Let us wait for the participants and then we'll start. Okay, so we shall start. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Adyasha Jaina. I'm a first year undergrad student and a member of Cyborg, the official robotics and automation society of NIT Rourkela. I welcome you all to this webinar on Introduction to React and React Hooks. Cyborg, which is registered under the Student Activity Center of NITR, has always been at the top in its field. Our various subdivisions, such as electronics, robotics, automation, mechanical, etc., have integrated their efforts together to undertake various technical projects like Intelligent Ground Vehicle Competition, International Aerial Robotic Competition, and many more. To know more about the other projects and events organized by us, you can check our Instagram, YouTube, and other social media pages. So, moving on, we are privileged to have on board today Mr. Madhav Bahl, a leading software engineer at Microsoft and a public speaker who aims to motivate bright minds. He runs a successful YouTube channel by the name The Lean Programmer, link of which is in the description below. You can subscribe to his channel. There, he provides classes and tips to uplift students seeking guidance in the field of tech. Apart from being a full stack JavaScript developer, he is also a self help blogger. Thank you, sir, for taking out time from your busy schedule. I welcome you to the webinar. Today, with us, we also have our faculty advisor, Professor A.K. Swai of the ECE department. He is a pioneer in the field of electronics, specifically in VLSI design and embedded systems. I welcome sir to speak a few words before we begin with our guest speaker. Sir, please.
Okay, good afternoon all. Uh, I welcome Mr. Madhav and also thanks him to join us and uh, give some time to share his thought on the latest topic like React and React hooks. At the same time, I want to introduce a bit about Cyborg. So Cyborg is one of our robotics and automation club of NIT Rourkela under Technical Society, which is under a student activity center. So our students mostly do 2 to 3 types of things like one is generation of manpower. So mostly in evening, when there was a they were at campus, they used to do physical classes from 6 to 8 on various topics like coding, mechanical subcomponents, and electronic components, etc., and PCB designing. And they also give training on how to build robotics on various aspects of robotics. At the same time, they also keep on doing certain projects, and mostly they try to develop some manpower as well as good projects on this robotics and automation area. So, without taking much time, I will again thank to Mr. Madhav to join us, and I will tell the organizer to proceed and start the webinar. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your benevolent words. So, now let me introduce today's topic a bit. React is an open source front end JavaScript library for building user interfaces or UI components. It is maintained by Facebook and a community of individual developers and companies. React can be used as a base in the development of single page or mobile applications. It is used by Facebook, Netflix, Airbnb, Instagram, and many other companies. Mr. Madhav Bahl has been teaching students and helping them make cool projects using React with the help of his YouTube channel. So, without taking any more time, let us learn from the expert. So, sir, you may take over now.
Thanks a lot for the beautiful introduction, Adesha. And let me share my screen as well before I start. So Adesha explained it very beautifully that React is something that is super beautiful and super exciting and super fun to learn as well. It's being used at so amazing companies. It's been like Facebook. Every one of us use Facebook. Facebook is built on React. Instagram app is built on React Native, and so many other applications that we use daily are built on top of React. So React is currently leading the tech industry. It won't be wrong to say that yes, React is leading the front end tech industry. So yes, I hope that you are super excited to actually learn it. So Adesha, let's do one thing. Let's increase the size of this screen to full, so that yeah, that would be awesome. Cool. So today's workshop will be completely hands-on. So we will be actually looking at all the concepts in React.js, almost all the basic concepts, and all we'll also be looking at a few modern tech things like React hooks and a little bit introduction towards that as well. And the best thing about it is that it's going to be completely hands-on. I'm not going to show you any slides. I'm not going to present to you any boring written theoretical material. We are going to actually start building and playing around applications by using everything that we learned today. If you want to check out the content of this video, you can go to the GitHub repository, which is github.com/the lean programmer cyborg nitr workshop. I know it's a big link, but yeah, I'll probably send it after this webinar. I'll send it to Adyesha or someone else from the team, and they can put it in the link of the description. They can put the link in the description. So yes, it's going to be super fun. But just one prerequisite to this is going to be Node.js. So Node.js is not a direct prerequisite to this. Basically, you just need to know a little bit basic of JavaScript. But still, since we are going to use create React app as a boilerplate, so don't worry if you don't understand these things right now. Like, we are using a boilerplate just so that we don't have to set everything from scratch. It will provide some pre-written code that we can actually use and start learning the basics of React instead of focusing more on creating our development environment. So yes, you will be needing Node.js, and basically we need npm here. So npm comes pre-installed and bundled with node.js. So all you need to do is, first of all, go to nodejs.org/en. I mean, just nodejs.org will do. It will automatically redirect you to /en endpoint. But yeah, so I'll probably type that on the chat if you are able to see it. But it's a simple link, nodejs.com.org Yeah, that's it. Node.js.org and download the LTS. It's going to be around, I think, as far as I remember, around 46 or 47 MB. So you are going to do that. I like it will be very quick to do that. So while I start introducing you with the little bit of theory, like why should we use React and what are React components, probably by that time you can do two things. Firstly, install nodejs.org on your system. Again, the link is very simple, nodejs.org, and download the LTS for Node.js. And then once you're done that, basically for latest versions of npm, npx also comes bundled with it. So don't worry about what is npm, what is node.js, what is npx. So all of these things might be a separate topic of discussion, but today we will be focusing just on React. So npm will just help us set a new create React application, and CRA basically, which stands for create React application, is going to help us build a little bit of boilerplate. So as you can see here, if you search create React app, in the first link, not in the first link, third link, create React app.dev. Basically, it's a pre-written code that helps us to start our project directly. Otherwise, we have to do a little bit of environment setup, which CRA helps us to save time on. So yeah, I want you to do is just go to your any place in your machine, in your local machine, and probably create a playground folder, because here we are going to play around with the React library. Open the command prompt, which is you can easily click here and type cmd. If you are using Linux or if you're using Mac, you can easily open terminal from this particular any directory, like any directory you want, and then type in npx space create. I'll just make it a little big so that it's more visible. Yeah, I think now it is cool. Npx create hyphen react hyphen app space the name of the application. So basically, again, as I said, create React app is nothing but a boilerplate so that you can get started with the coding part instead of thinking too much about the environment setup and all of those things. So yes, all you need to do is type npx create hyphen react hyphen app, then space the name of your application. I'm just going to call it play because I'm going to play around with it. It's not some specific application that we are building today. We are actually going to explore the concepts of React, like React components, component architecture, one-way data flow in React, JSX, state, props, lifecycle methods, React hooks, lifecycle methods versus use effect, and all these things, just while playing around with the code. We're not going to build a specific application as such, but yeah, again, a little bit of promotion. I'm really sorry for that, but yeah, if you guys want to, because it's not feasible to cover everything in a single 1 hour webinar. So yes, if you want to learn everything in detail, you can go to my playlist section in youtube.com/the lean programmer, where you can find React mega tutorial project 1 and project 2. I keep updating projects every month. So this month we'll be learning the Flexbox. Previous month we learned a lot of things, so yeah, you can feel free to check out to learn everything in detail. But yes, in this webinar as well, we are going to actually see everything, how to build everything from scratch. So yes, by the time it sets up our create React application, so by doing this, it will be beneficial for us because easily it can take around 2 to 3 minutes. So we might not want to waste our time after discussing the theoretical part. So that's why I'm telling you to just download the Node.js LTS and then type in this command npx create React app space playground, and then open the playground and probably yes, that's done for me. And then I can cd into the play folder, and then I can open it in my text editor, which is Visual Studio. I love Visual Studio Code. For you, it can be Notepad++, Sublime Text, Atom, or VS Code. But yes, it's completely your choice. So yes, once that command is completed, you will see something like this, a play folder, and then here you can open this particular directory in your text editor. And now we are going to see a little bit of theoretical section. So first of all, why React? As Adyesha already told, that it has a really amazing developer community. It's maintained by Facebook and it's open source. So developers from all over the world come and contribute to this library. Its learning curve is so smooth. You won't even feel that you are learning something as complex or as amazing as a library which is used to build Facebook. It's super smooth. You can build reusable components from it. You can build a component that you're using in one project, and then you can directly pick up that component and start using it in your another project. You can it's helpful because it provides fast rendering with virtual DOM. What is a virtual DOM? Maybe we can discuss it within this webinar while discussing everything else. But for those who have a little bit knowledge about web development, DOM is basically a document object model. React provides us with a virtual DOM, basically, which you can say as a sort of virtual document object model on top of the real DOM. So whenever you can see it something like telling in terms of a real in layman terms, like let's say if you change anything in your screen, you don't have to go and update that particular section by doing things like document.id, like get element by id and all those things. All you need to do is change your data and everything else will be taken care of by React. It has great developer tools. While using React, you can build your project which is properly modularized. You can have proper abstraction in your code, and the best thing about it is React is a library, and it's not limited just to web. You can use React DOM for building web applications. You can use React Native for building native applications, phone applications, Android, iOS, and all those things. You can use React Desktop to build desktop applications. And then I think there was one more, React Hyper, if I'm not wrong. Maybe you can check it out later on. But yes, that was, I think, used for building terminal applications. And this is super cool. So let me give you a short introduction about what are React components. React components are nothing but the components that you see on your screen. So for example, this is a very simple blogging application, as you can see, or maybe a comment application, something like that. So in this application, you can see there are various components. There is a banner, which could be a potential component. There's a comment form, which could be a component. There's a comment list, which could be built as a separate component. There is a comment. There are n number of comments, and comment component can be built separately, and which can be reused again and again. And then everything in this app is contained inside a parent component, which we are calling app. So this is a general convention. You can call it anything that you want, but it's a general convention that we call the topmost level component or the parent component as React. So in one of my webinars, I think a few months ago, I built React Pokedex, like a Pokedex application. I'm not sure how many of you used to watch Pokemon in your childhood, but yes, if someone did, you'll be able to relate. There was a thing called Pokedex where you could check the information about each Pokemon. So this was something I built in a live webinar, but that webinar extended to 2.5 hours, which I did not want. So yes, I was really willing to actually build something cool within the webinar, but trust me guys, it becomes very difficult to actually teach the basic concepts plus build an app from scratch within a live webinar, which is of 1 hour. If it could have been of 3 hours, I would have loved to do that, but yes. So yes, this was something. The webinar got extended to, I think, 2.5 hours or 3 hours, but I had a lot of fun. So yes, this is a sample application, and this shows the power of React as well. So we can search for our Pokemons, let's say Ivysaur and Snivy. We can click on any one of them to actually fetch the information of that particular Pokemon. So yes, this is super cool. So for this application, I'm just giving a reference that what all components did I use. And of course, if you have any doubt in between, please feel free to put it on the chat section. I will see that. So thanks a lot, Bhavya. I am really glad to see your appreciation. Thanks a lot for this. And yes, till now, anytime. So because I will be discussing the basics of React, which you can use to build a lot of applications after, like right now, after this particular webinar ends, you'll be able to build your portfolio application, you'll be able to build some simple applications on your own. So yes, I want all of you to understand the basic concepts clearly. So please feel free to ask any doubt that you have in between anywhere, and I'll be seeing the chat section, and I'll be coming back to the questions as soon as you ask them. I'll try to at least. So yeah. So in this particular Pokédex application, you can see there is potential. So I'm just telling you how to figure out the components, potential components for your application. While you start building any application, the first thing should be you should have the mockups and wireframes and all those things. So for example, I'll just give you a simple example. So right now I was actually thinking to make a sort of landing page for my AAM series which I have made. So firstly, I made a sort of design for that. So this is the design which I came up with. I used Figma for that. My computer is a little bit slow, no worries. So yes, once we have the design, so yes, I in this also, what the first step that I took was to build the designs of this particular Pokedex application. After I was done with the designs, I actually figured out what would be the components and hierarchy of those components. So as I told you, the container, the parent container would be app component. Inside app there could be let's say the outermost could be the Pokedex component. Inside Pokedex, there could be a Poke search result at right, and then at left there could be a, let's say, um, Poke card component, and inside Poke card component there could be a search box as well as a list of Pokemons, which is Poke list component. So yeah, this is a simple way which we can figure out what all components do we need. You have to be very clever. There's no hard and fast rule here of like this should be made as a component or this should not be made as a component. If you were given a task to make this Pokédex application, you could have chosen this heading tag to be one another component. It's completely up to you, but there is no use of making Pokédex just the title of it as a component, right? Because title is a atomic level thing. You don't require it to be inside a component. It's just an h1 tag. So yes, whenever it's a atomic level HTML tag, we probably don't need to put it inside a component. But when we have to accumulate or collect a few of those things together, we put them inside a container and call it as a component. So yes, let me also explain you the one-way data flow in React. So taking the same example of this Pokédex application. So as you might have noticed, the outermost container or the outermost component will be the app component. Inside app, there's going to be a Pokédex component. Inside Pokédex, there are going to be the two children of Pokédex. The first one is going to be the Poké list, and the second one is going to be the Poké search result. The Poke list component will have the Poke list component will have two children. The first one would be Poke card, and second one would be the search box. There will be n number of Poke cards. I'm sorry, I think I said a little bit wrong previously that this card is Poke list, but I think you got my point, right? That there is these different components, and within those components we can form a sort of hierarchy. So Ashutosh just asked me that will the database of Pokemon be included in component? No, it's not necessarily so. So all of this depends on how we design our application. For you, probably, Ashutosh, you could build your app in such a way that you are containing the database within the component, or it could be that could be the one way. Another way could be to make use of an external API. There are hundreds of Pokemon APIs present there out there, from which you could make a call, and let's say within the Pokédex container, let's say Pokédex component, anytime when I search, you can make a sort of call to the API of Pokemon. The same thing happens whenever you start searching on Amazon. So on Amazon also, we do have a search bar where you type things like, let's say I want to buy let's say a sort of laptop. So we'll start typing laptop and all those things. So, but the thing that happens here is let's say if we are actually calling an API on every key press, it's going to be super inefficient. So they use different concepts like throttling and debouncing to make the search more efficient. So that was another thing. The first one was to maintain the whole database inside a component. Second thing could be to make use of network calls. Third thing could be to maintain your own backend and maybe probably you can put your database in your own server and then host your own server and use your service as an API. That was third thing. Fourth thing could be, let's say I could maybe store the list of Pokemons as a normal text file and then read it as a normal JavaScript file and then read the list of Pokemon from there, and there are endless options. So the whole point here, Ashutosh, was you will have to make the choices according to the requirements of your project. So it's a general concept in software engineering. There is never a single solution to any question, or every question is going to have endless solutions and endless answers. You will have to be clever enough to find the best and most efficient answer for your question according to your situation. So I hope I was able to answer to your question, Ashutosh. So yes, let's start building a sort of sample application. Now I've talked so much. So let's go back to our playground directory. And inside our playground directory, let me remind you, I opened it with VS Code. And yes, let me tell you how it looks like, how the create React app structure looks like. So basically it will have a node modules file, folder. Node modules is going to contain all the dependencies that our project use. You probably don't want to modify anything in this. If you want to include any new library, you will be going to package.json. Package.json contains the information about your project. For example, the name of our application is play. The version is this, dependencies, list of dependencies, scripts, start script, and all those things, ESLint config, and all these things, the information about your project. So I need you to do one more thing, open terminal inside your VS Code, or you can open command prompt inside your playground directory and then type npm space start. This is going to start your React application, npm space start. Once you do that, within a second or so, it will open your React application. By the time it opens, let me continue with it. So README is nothing but a description of your project. So yeah, I can say this as playground, React playground maybe. Oops. Yep. And yarn lock is nothing but it maintains the sort of description about all the dependencies that we are using, an exact version of those dependencies, and so on. You don't need to care about yarn lock. It's an auto-generated file. Then git ignore is nothing but the dependencies dependencies or anything that you wish to ignore from your version control. All of these files, like node module, will not be pushed to GitHub. So now you can forget about everything that's present in src. I am going to just delete it, but before I delete it, let me show you what's present in public. Public directory is containing the HTML file and some other static assets. So you probably will never need to change this HTML file unless and until you are including any external CSS file or something like that. And probably one more thing, to change the title of your application, I'm going to change it to playground. And then once it opens, it will look something like this. So let me explain you what's happening here. Basically, what happens here is the entry point of your React application is this src directory. Again, if you have any questions till now, feel free to ask me. So yes, the entry point of your project is going to be the index.js inside your src. In index.js, we are using a function provided to us by React DOM. It's React DOM.render. Basically, it's doing nothing but taking our, let me just comment it out completely to show you what's happening here. So this app, which you are seeing here, app, consider it to be a sort of HTML tag for now, and I'm going to show you what's happening here. So let's say React DOM is the library or web of React. So React DOM.render method firstly takes in that HTML or JSX element. JSX is a new term that came in right now. This might confuse you a little bit, but this is super exciting. So JSX is nothing but HTML inside your JavaScript. I'm going to show you how that is done. Just give me a moment. So let me just do one more thing quickly. So I never want my tab width to be two spaces. I want it four. So you can ignore this part. This is just a style configuration which I did so that I can auto save and all those things. But yes, forget about that. I am just indenting my uh, VS Code properly. Cool. So React DOM.render method is nothing but it takes two argument. First argument is your HTML or JavaScript tag. Let's say hello world. And then I hope you all are following along with me. And if you are stuck somewhere, please feel free to reach out. So yes, and the second argument is the path of where you want to display this particular HTML element or JSX element. So inside our HTML, we see that we have a div with the ID of root. Let me remind you something very simple that you must have read in your high school or maybe in your college, that document dot get element by ID root. So this is nothing but this is the path where we actually want to display this HTML tag. The path is nothing but a div with an ID of root. That's it. That's simple as that. Document.getElement by ID. I hope you're able to understand here. Now we can safely close our index.html. We would never need it after this. So yes, let's refresh this application and it shows hello world. This is super awesome. Let me do one more thing. Let me move this side by side so that you guys are able to see both of the things properly. And let me also increase the size. I think this should be fine. If my screen size is too small, please let me know. I increase the font. But yeah, cool. So now comes, let me remove every other file apart from index.js. We are going to build it everything together. What happened here? Did I delete index.html directly? Cool. So I think I deleted index.js instead of deleting everything else. Let me just do this from here to here and delete this, and from here to here delete this as well. So this is nothing but a simple index.js file where we are doing nothing. Let's also not include CSS file. We are just importing our React from React and React DOM from React DOM, and then we are using this render method. And let's refresh it. It's going to work. Awesome. So let me start building our first component. So here we are going to just build a simple counter application. A simple, like there will be a button and we can click on that button to increase the count of that particular, let's say, the count that is being shown on the screen. So now I'm going to tell you what is this JSX thing about. Cool. So in the src directory, let me open the let me create a new file. I'm going to call that file as app.js or JSX. It's completely up to you. You can even use JS, you can even use JSX. I prefer using JSX because it clearly tells the users that this file is a React component. It's not just a normal file. Plus, I also follow some directory structures like having one component in one directory, but I'm not going to follow all of that in today because this is just a simple playground application. So yes, for more, you can probably visit my YouTube channel, and there you can find all the playlists and start with the project one, start with the basics, and it's going to be super exciting. Awesome. So now let's do one thing. First of all, whenever you are building a component, there are two types of component. First one is functional component and second one is class-based components. It's as simple as the functions that you read in your basic programming class. There's one function and there's a class. The same class as that OOPS concepts and object-oriented programming and all those things. So either you can create, let me remind you, a component is nothing but something that you see on your screen. For example, this comment form, this comment list, and so on. So you can create that component either by using a function or by using a class. Let me start with a simple functional component. All you need to do is, first of all, import the React library. This is an import statement using which you can import your dependencies. Import React from React. Awesome. The second step is, you like, this is the simplest structure of your components which you are going to see in any React application. Firstly, they will be importing their dependencies and their external files, CSS files, images, and all those things. Secondly, they will be defining the component itself, which could either be a class or which could be a function. So for now, I'm going to create a functional component. Function, let's name it as anything app. Yeah, that seems fine. And I'm going to return a simple div here. This is the best thing about it. And I'm going to create an h1 saying this is a functional component. Awesome. And one last thing, I'm going to export it from this file, export default app. So this syntax that you see here, it's called JSX. This whole file is JavaScript file. Just to prove you, I'm going to rename it as JS file, not JSX, just to prove you that this is a normal JavaScript file. Inside this JavaScript file, we have a function which returns HTML. So this is something super cool that React introduced to the world. This is called JSX. So now what I can do is I'll import. So as you can see, import statements, import the app from dot slash the relative path app. And now instead of showing the h1 hello world, I'm going to show app like this. And once I save this, I am going to refresh this and see this is a functional component. I'm just going to do one thing pretty quickly. I am going to close this development server here and I'm going to open this through VS Code. I'm not sure why this is not auto refreshing, but I think opening through VS Code might help. Nothing, just an npm start command, which is going to open another localhost 3000, a development server, and which is also going to show the same thing. So yes, for now, we have understood what's there in the index.js. Let's close this file index.js and come back to our other concepts. So this was a sample functional component, and this is how we write JSX. Now, a question could come to your mind. If this is JavaScript, it's a normal JavaScript, right? If this is JavaScript, I should be able to run it here as well, right? Let me try it out. So I'm going to try const my JSX equal to h1 hello, and then let's close this h1 tab. Is it going to work here? I am going to ask this from you guys. I'm waiting for your response here. Is this going to work here? The thing that I wrote here, my JSX is equal to h1 hello world. I'm waiting for your response, guys. I want to hear this from you. That do you think this is going to work here? Come on, guys. Anyone who is, if you are following along, anyone, just a simple question. Is this going to work as expected here, just like it worked here? Awesome. So yes, ideally it should, right? So Divyajot and Dhruvil commented that it might work, but not sure. So yes, that's the problem. That's the problem that comes in, that this, if I type this is not going to work because this is not supported in JavaScript. So basically this is JSX, not JS. And JSX is something that actually got introduced after React. So this is not going to work in your web browser. Your web browser does not understand what this H1 hello world is. So how does this work? So behind the scenes, this Create React app is using something called Babel. Babel is a transpiler. Transpiler is nothing but, you can search the definition on Google. Transpiler means to transpile or convert one language to another, one programming language to another programming language. So behind the scenes, our Create React app is actually converting this HTML into the JavaScript, the native JavaScript that we use. And that is how it's working here, but it's not working in the browser. So yes, whenever you are asked in future that JSX is does will JSX work on your browser or something like that, you can be confident enough that now that no, it's not going to work on your browser. In future, it might work. Your browsers might be compatible to it, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. And that's the reason why I told you to use Create React app. If you were not using Create React app, you could have actually done that manually as well, but that involves a few extra steps, 3 to 4 extra steps. So by using Create React app, you only required one simple command, and that command was just this command: npx create react app and the name of your application. And now you are good to go. But if you would have not used that, you would have to set up everything from scratch. Cool. So that's that. And now let's see what's on next on our topic. So now you understood JSX. So now let's also understand the concept of state. Before understanding the concept of state, let's understand the concept of class-based component. So this was a functional component. This was a function returning HTML. There is a second type of component which is called class-based component. So let's build another component. Firstly, let me rename the app.js to app.jsx just to be more okay. So basically our index.html got failed in finding it. Let me import the app again from /app. That's it. And now it should work most probably. Also, it's not automatically picking up. I'm not sure why that's happening here. Let me see. Yeah, that happened now. Cool. Ideally, we don't even need to put JSX. This might be some little bug which is happening on my local machine. This is not ideally, this won't happen for you, but yeah. Cool. So now that we have app.jsx set up, let's build another component. Let's build a counter application that's going to have a button and going to have a text. In text, it's going to show some number, and then we are going to increase that number as soon as we click on that button. So let me create a class-based component called counter.jsx. So how to create class-based component? Very simple. Import. First part is import statements, importing the dependencies. Second part, writing your component. Third part, exporting the component. So let's import React from React. Now I'm going to define a class instead of a function. And also let's change this to an ES6 arrow function. I don't like using function keyword anymore now. So this is something which you might not understand, but this is also a function. If you don't know JavaScript, this might be something difficult to understand, but this is nothing but a simple arrow function. You might not. So I did that remove the function keyword and make this into an arrow function. So now it's a function which I'm assigning to app, and then it has a set of parentheses, and then it has an arrow, and then it has the function definition. That's another syntax. There's a big difference between arrow functions and normal functions, but yes, that's out of scope for this webinar. But yeah, for now you can just see it as a normal function. Now let's try to create a class-based component. Just give me a minute, my throat is aching. I'll be back in 30 seconds. Yep, I'm back. So I'm so sorry, guys. I just went to drink water. Cool. So let's build a class-based component. I'm going to name it as counter. Again, you might see the name of the component and the name of the file is usually the same. That's a normal convention that we follow. Even if you don't keep it same, it's completely fine and it's completely up to you. But I prefer following this convention as it makes things easier. As long as our project keeps growing, you will be adding more components, and it adds unnecessary complexity to our application if we don't follow the general conventions that we have in our community. So yes, let's create a class-based components. So it's going to be a simple class which is going to extend. So you might have read the concept of inheritance. So it's going to extend. It's going to extend React.component. So basically, it was a simple class till now, but now it's extending React.component. React.component class basically interface gives us a render method. Render. And now instead of, we can't directly return the HTML from a class, right? Class is not a function. So we rather have a render method, and from our render method, now we can return our HTML. So I'm going to wrap it inside a div. Within my div, I'm going to first have a h2 saying the count is, and let's say for now it's 0, and then I'm going to have a button which is going to say increase the counter. As simple as that. And now let me export this file as well. Export counter. Oops. Awesome. So now we have made another component. So this was a functional component, and now this is a class-based component. So from our this counter component, I'm going to include it within our my app file, and I'm going to say import counter from dot slash counter. And now I can actually use it here. As simple as that. So basically we can use our JSX components just like we use our HTML tags. And now you're going to see it's going to appear on the screen. The count is 0 and there's a button to increase the counter. So that was the concept of a functional component versus a class-based component. I don't know what happened to my throat, but anyways, let's continue. So in your class-based component, basically, you can also include this thing called state. We can also do that in a functional component, but that is something that is provided to us by hooks, which is still a little bit ahead. So I know it's almost the time, it's 4:45, but don't worry. I'm going to cover everything in the next 25 minutes or so. So yes, hang on with me here and don't worry about anything. Cool. So till now we studied about why do we need React, React components, component architecture, one-way data flow in React, JSX. And now let's have a look at state and props. So basically state is nothing but a sort of data, a piece of data that you might need to save in your application. Let me repeat myself. A state is nothing but a data which you might need to save in your application for many reasons. It could be for solving any logic, it could be for displaying on screen, and it might change with time. Let me repeat myself once again, one last time. What is a state? A state is nothing but a piece of data which might change with time, which you might need to save in your application because it can change with time, which you might need for several purposes like displaying it on screen or doing some logic or something like that. So that's it. So I am going to maintain. So here you can easily see this count 0, 1, 2, 3. This is a variable that we might need to store because this will keep changing with time and we need to render it on our screen. So I'm going to save it in my state. So let's define our state. A state is defined nothing but as a JavaScript object. JavaScript object is nothing but a key value pair. Key is to value. If you have read about Python, in Python we have dictionaries. In JavaScript we have object. So a state is defined by a JavaScript object. So I'm going to do this state equal to, let's save it as count, and let's give it the initial value of 0. And now I can call this count here instead of showing this 0 directly. Count. No, this did not work. Why? Because count is not accessible directly, right? It's a part of this state object. So I'm going to call it by this dot state dot count. Now it's going to work, and you can verify that by doing simple thing like let's change the count to 10. So if we change the count to 10, it changed here. Let's change the count to, let's say 99, or let's say 111001. It changed here. So yes, that proves that this count is now getting picked up within from our state. And this curly brace expression is basically whenever you want to use any variable or any expression or a function inside your JavaScript X, which is XML JavaScript JSX, you will need to call this like this. So we need to have a curly braces call this variable state this dot state dot count. Yes, that's all about the state. Basically, it can change with time, and it can actually we need to save it. So I just saw a question by Divya Jyoti. So Divya Jyoti just asked me that is state similar to a checkpoint? You can say that checkpoint. I would need more context here though. What do you mean by a checkpoint? Is it a sort of place in your application, like let's say a checkpoint in your application that after this is going to happen? So yes, you can have that in your state. So if you provide me a little more context of what do you mean by a checkpoint, I'll be able to answer this better. But yes, if that's what something you are able to relate to, that might be the case here. Cool. So now let's do one more thing. Let's define a function const increase counter. I'm going to define it as, oh, not, we don't need to define const. This is a class. I'm so sorry. I thought it was a functional component. So we don't need to write the const here. So yeah, let's say increase counter. And I'm going to define it as a regular arrow function. And here, what I'm going to do is I am going to, as soon as this is called, this dot state dot count equal to this dot state dot count plus 1. So for the people who know React, they are going to kill me for writing this, but don't worry. Just give me a moment, hang on for a moment, and I'm going to show you why this thing is something really bad, which you should never ever do. Cool. So now I have a function increase counter, which whenever called is going to increase our state count. So now I just need to call this function from inside our button, right? Whenever this button is pressed, we need to actually call this function. So you must remember about those DOM event handlers. Similar to the event handlers that are there in JavaScript, React also has synthetic event handlers, which are just like this on click. And on our on click, we can again define a function. So either I can directly pass on the increase counter here, or I can call the function with this, something like this. So I'm going to call this dot increase counter. That's a simple thing here. If you're writing it like this, you will need to call your function. If you are directly passing it, you don't need to call it. You directly need to pass it at this dot increase counter. So this is because you are just assigning a function here. You don't need to call the function. Let me explain once again. On click expects a function definition, not a function call. So doing something like this dot increase counter, this is calling the function. On click is not expecting a function call, rather it's expecting a function definition. When we use syntax like this is also a function definition. This is not a call to the function. So yes, let me use like this increase counter. Cool. So now whenever we press this button, ideally it should increase our counter, right? So You guys can also make your guesses whether it's going to increase the counter or not. I'm waiting for your response whether it's going to increase the counter or not. Just feel free to put it in the chat section. What do you think is going to happen? Is it going to increase our counter or not? I am going to test this out very quickly. Let's click on the increase the counter button a few times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It did not increase the counter, or did it? I want you guys to guess what happened here. Did it increase the count or not? The count still seems to be zero. But the fun part here is I really want you to guess here, but never mind, I'll tell you the answer. The count actually increased, but it's not showing anything here. Let me show you why. So basically, what happens here is let me put a log statement console.log and let me put this.state.count. And let me also put a string. The current count is. So you're going to be surprised here to see that whenever I let me move this to the bottom. So yeah, you can see this. Cool. So now let me refresh this. And whenever I click on the counter, 1, the current count is 1. 2, the current count is 2. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So as you can see that the count has changed, but it's not reflecting here. So Drivel just made a quick guess that maybe we did not change the property to change that element. So you are quite close, Drivel. Basically what's happening here is if you directly change the state count, yeah, Divyajyoti, that's why I'm going to tell you there's a warning here and there's a completely valid warning. So basically if we directly try to increase the count is going to actually increase here, but it's not going to trigger a re-render. So the beauty of React is we can directly change the data and it's going to re-render your whole component, and within that component wherever that data needs to be changed, only that will be re-render, which makes React super fast. And that's why we don't need to actually care about what we are changing and what we are not changing, and all those things which we did used to do in our native vanilla JavaScript. So the thing that we went wrong here is there is a proper method to change our state. We can't just directly assign a new value to our state. So it's clearly written that do not mutate state directly, use set state. So now I'm going to tell you the correct way of doing this. Instead of increasing your state, what you need to do is do something like this. This dot set state, and inside that you need to pass on your new state. Our new state is going to be count, and the value of count is going to be this dot state dot count plus 1. As simple as that. So instead of directly assigning the state a new value, we are using set state. Inside that set state function, we are passing on the new state. So this new state is going to have the same schema or the same properties which this state had, but the values will be updated. Like the count variable is going to be set to current count plus 1, and now it's going to work as we expected. So this is something super cool. So this was something very, very important. This is called state. So you probably might not would want to miss this. State is the basic of React, and don't miss it. If you did not understand what I told you, please feel free to ask me any questions that you have, or even after this webinar is over, you can go through this particular section once again to actually know what a state is. Now let's come on to props. So basically, and after the props, we will be going to the React hooks. So now there are only two things remaining: props and React hooks. The lifecycle components also we can discuss a little bit at the end probably. But yes, for now, let's keep it like this. Cool. So in state, we have it like this and everything is working fine. But let's say, what if I need to change something? Let's say I need to create my button inside a separate component. So for now, let me create a separate component saying counter button dot JSX. I'm going to copy this value. Let me create a new functional component, import React from, let me use a shortcut, import React from React. I'm going to create a simple functional component. I'm going to name it as counter button. And inside that, I'm just going to return a div. Inside my div, I'm going to return a button. This is going to say increase the counter value. As simple as that. Now, what if I need to do something like this? And what if I need to have a completely separate function? Let's say I need to show the count there as well. So let me add this as well. Let's make it h2, and let's say the current count is 0. As simple as that. And let me, for now, let's not have it here, and let's say I need this element, this whole counter component, as, let's say, just a parent component to this. So I'm going to call this like first let's assign a sort of h2 here. This is the parent to actual count, and then let's call our counter button. So now I hope it's not too difficult to understand the changes that I did. The only thing that I changed was I took the new properties, the h2 and the button properties, the h2 and the button tag into a separate component. Let's say something happened to our application, and now we think that, let's say there's a design change, and now we are planning to create a separate component for this thing. Now, how are you going to? We were actually using the state in our counter component, but now we need to access that particular element, that particular value in our counter button. How are we going to do that? This is where our props come in. So as I was telling you in the beginning, that there's only one directional data flow in React. We can pass on the data from parent component to child component, or we can call functions from child to parent. There is no direct communication between siblings. For the direct communication between siblings, there are other things like Redux, where you can store the state in a completely global way and then call that state directly from any component. That's not part of today's discussion. But yes, in the way that React is made, you cannot exchange data between siblings. So props is the way we exchange the data. Let me tell you once again, you're going to get confused about what the difference between state and props. A lot of people get confused about this. Don't be confused here. State is the data that we are saving, and props is the data that we will be passing on from parent component to child component. So let's do that. Let's pass on the value of count from our counter component to our counter button component. Let's do it like this. Let's do something like count equal to, and here let's pass this dot state dot count. So this is the way we pass our count, the props. This is a props now. This is a prop now. Count is a prop which will be accessible inside our counter button. How will we access that? Very simple. We are going to have this property props, and now you can see, let's put a console.log here. Let's put what is props. Now again, let me open the console very quickly. So yes, this prop is nothing but count equal to 0. Let me confirm that once again. Props is nothing but count equal to 0. So yes, this is how we pass on data from parent component to child component. So state is something which we save in our application, and props is the data which we pass on from parent to child. So this was the way we do that. While calling that JSX component, we pass on the props like this, and we access that prop through the argument in that functional component. But then how are we going to access it within our class-based component? Let's say I call my counter with, let's say, my name equal to Madhav. Then in our class-based component, this is a class-based component. We don't have any arguments like this, right? So for this is very, very simple. In our class-based components, the props are accessible through this dot props. As simple as that. So let's type it out. This dot props dot name. So I'll say my name is, and my name is Madhav. So it passed on Madhav correctly. So that is something super cool. This is how we pass on the props, and this is how we use the props in class-based components, and this is how we use the props in functional components. This is some super cool. So now we have done one more thing. Let's make this app working once again. So now we have access to the count, and now let's replace that by props.count. And let's check it out by changing the count to 99 here. And yes, it changed. It's working completely fine. Now let's do one thing. Let's destructure our arguments. So this is one way. This is a JavaScript concept basically. This is not related to React. So instead of actually passing on the props and then taking out, we can directly destructure. We can directly pull out the count. The name of the variable is count, right? This is the name of the variable. This is the name of the props. So we can actually pull out the count from our props object directly from the arguments. Cool. So yeah, that sounds awesome. And now just one final thing. How are we going to increase the value? Because now this button is not doing anything. It's going to be very, very simple. So now you are learning how to pass on the data from child to parent. So this was from parent to child. From our parent, we passed on the count information. We passed on the count information, like we passed on the count from counter, which was parent, to counter button, which was child. Now we need to do something like whenever we click on the button is defined inside our child component. So whenever something happens in child, we need to somehow pass it on to the parent and tell him to actually change the state. How are we going to do that? We can also pass functions as props. I'm going to show you something magical here. So now I'm passing on the functional, like let's say the name of the prop can be anything. Let's say on count change. And now we need to pass on the exact function increase counter. And now let's go inside it. Let's copy the on count change and let's destructure it from here. Now, as you can see, we now have the access to this function increase counter. Now I'm going to do something on click equal to, let's define a function and let's call on count change. As simple as that. So did you see the magic here? What is happening behind the scenes is that we have the definition of the function here in the counter. We are passing on the function to our counter button. It is getting called in our counter button, but it was defined in our counter. So now this child component is triggering this function which is defined in our counter, and now this is going to work completely fine. As you can see, it works awesome. Cool. So yes, this was it about state versus props. Now let's skip lifecycle methods again, because we have already crossed the time. So this is the thing that happens with React. So I get so engaged in teaching that I don't prefer rushing up with the concepts, because that makes the things difficult to understand. So I hope that you were able to understand everything till now. Let me give you a small introduction to React hooks. For the lifecycle methods, trust me, it's very, very simple. And now again, for that, basically you can do one thing. Again, you can probably go to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/theleanprogrammer. And in the second project, I have taught the basics plus the lifecycle methods in the second project, which you can, of course, check it out. The app that we built there was this Flash type application, which was a typing speed test where you can actually test out your typing speed. So yes, let's not cover the lifecycle methods in today's thing, but now let's quickly go over hooks. So why do we use hooks, and what is the advantage of using hooks, and what are hooks actually? So earlier, when React was originally introduced, the thing with React was that the state could only be defined in our class-based components. So that's a huge drawback. Our class-based components are generally big components. Like in just a small logic. So this whole component just contains very little logic. It contains two lines of HTML and then one function and then one state. But this whole component looks pretty big. Plus, there are more reasons about it that we need to create functional component more and more accessible and more powerful. So, in the recent advancements in React, they actually introduced the concept of React hooks. So now everything that we could do with a class based component is possible with functional component as well. So our hooks are nothing but functions that allow us to use the features that were given to us by a class-based component inside our functional component as well. Let me repeat myself. A React hook is nothing but a function that is provided to us by React, which helps us use the features which are originally intended for a class-based component to be used inside a functional component. For example, state. State was native to a class-based component, but now we can use state in our functional component as well. For example, lifecycle methods. Lifecycle methods were originally intended for for class-based component, but now using React, we can use function lifecycle methods. Not exact lifecycle method, but we can have something similar in our functional components. Let's take a break of just 30 seconds. This is the last section, guys. It's going to take 5 to 7 minutes only, trust me. But let's take a quick break of 15 to 30 seconds and let's be back here within 30 seconds. Till then, if you have any doubt, please feel free to mention it in the chat. Awesome. So I'm back. So let me give you a small introduction to React hooks. Hooks allow you to hook into React state and lifecycle features. This is the exact definition which React documentation provides us. Hooks allow you to hook into React state and lifecycle features. So a class-based component is basically implemented through JavaScript class. It uses JSX to produce content. It has state to update content and data. It has lifecycle methods to run some functions at various points in the lifecycle of the component. Now, the functional components actually earlier were accessible to only these two things. They were JavaScript functions intended to implement it through a function, and they use JavaScript X, which is JavaScript XML, JSX to produce the content. But now, after the introduction of hooks, we can now use hooks to update our content slash data. Example, the use state hook. And we can also use hooks to actually call this lifecycle methods, not a lifecycle methods, but yeah, to call some functions at various points of time in the lifecycle of our React component. So let me tell you a small example of use state hook. So basically, if you do something like this in your functional component state equal to this is not at all allowed, because you can't do that. And even if you do something like assign it to a variable, this won't do. Like this is not that state which React is providing us. So very simple. All you need to do here is use state hook. Let me tell you once again, use state hook. So this is how we define a use state hook. Let me do one thing. Let's quickly convert our counter into a functional component. While converting into a functional component, we will actually get the need of using useState hook. So how to convert it into a functional component? Very, very simple. First of all, let's remove everything that's present here, react.component, and let's change class to a function. Cool. Not here, here. But again, I prefer having the ES6 arrow functions, class counter equal to this. This is again a function. And now here, it's going to give some errors. So first of all, in our functional component, we directly return the JSX. We do not have a render method. So let's remove that. Let's remove this as well. Cool. So now we are actually returning this. Second update is, earlier this was getting used as the class method, but now it's not a class. So it's not a method anymore. It's not a class method. It's a function which we need to actually define. So let's do that. Now, one final thing that's going to do a little bit problem here is state. How to use the state. So in our functional components, we use use state hook. We use the use state hook to use state, as the name suggests, use state. So what we are going to do here is this is the syntax. So basically it returns an array, which is this use state returns an array which contains two things. First one is our state and the second one is our set state. So let me do one thing, const count. This is again JavaScript. We are basically destructuring out a count and set count from our array that is being returned by the use state. And inside use state, we actually provide the initial value of the state. So here we now have the access to count. We now have the access to set count, just like set state, this dot set state here. So instead of using this dot set state, now we will be using set count. So let's quickly do those changes. So inside our increase counter, we don't need to do something like this. So the access to this is no longer present because this is not a class, this is a function. So all we need to do is set count of count plus 1. As simple as that. Now let's change a few more things. First of all, this dot props dot name. No, we don't require this dot props anymore because this is a functional component. Cool. So props dot name will work. Then a counter button. So inside our counter button, we are doing something like this dot state dot count, which is not going to work. It did work because actually it is taking the count from the state because it's hooking into state, but this is not something which you should do. It can cause a lot of problems here. So yeah, cool. So as you see, it did. So cannot read the property state of undefined. So this is undefined here. The access to, because let me tell you once again, this is not a class anymore. This is a function. So this basically this which represents this particular class is no longer present. So instead of this, we are going to remove this and just pass on the count. And instead of this dot increase counter, we're just going to pass the increase counter. And here you go. Now we have our application converted into 100% functional components, which is working perfectly fine. So this is something super cool. I will do one thing now. I'll just do one thing. I will just give me a moment so that you guys have access to this particular repository. I will, yeah, I will just push the code to GitHub. Git init, git remote add origin, git pull, git add dot. Cool. There is some error. You have another. Oh, cool. So there is another. Cool. So I'll do that after this webinar. So what I'll do is I'll update this repository with the sample code that we wrote right now, and you can go through that code once again. Plus, for your information, this whole playlist is there to explain to you how React works completely in depth, completely from scratch. So do go through it. And yes, we will be building in this particular application. The first project that we built here was this name it application, which will suggest you the names. For example, if I type let's say code, it's going to suggest you a lot of names that you can use for your next project. Let's say for your next hackathon, if you are building something on a car, so car mark, recar, up car, and all those things. Second was a flash type, which we discussed, and third is going to come next week. It's going to be Flexbox. So I hope you enjoyed this session, and please let me know if you have any doubts. I know I could not cover use effect hook and the lifecycle methods, but that's something that happens uh, because we should not rush through the basic concepts of React. Otherwise, it won't be useful for you guys. So let me know how did you like this video. Let me know if this was helpful, and stay in touch with me. I would love to help you out whenever you have any doubt. And that's it. Thanks a lot for having me here as well, Cyborg team.
Amazing session. Really, we enjoyed it a lot. Got to learn a lot. I myself am trying to enter the field of React development, web dev in React, and really amazing session.
Thanks a lot, Rutaj. Rutaj.
Yeah.
Indeed, React is vast and we had time constraints, so we would look forward to more of these sessions provided your time permits, sir.
Sure, definitely. Like you can call me, but my schedule is booked till 2 months from now. So yeah, I think after 1.5 month, if you want, I can go ahead with some complex topic like Redux. But for that, you'll need some students who actually know the concepts of React. Otherwise, it will go over the head, and yeah, it won't be useful. So yes, till that time, everyone who was present here in today's webinar, you can brush up your basics of React, and then probably, I'm not confirming it right now, but yes, I would love to actually teach Redux to you as well.
Thank you so much, sir. And like you said at the beginning, React is beautiful and you just made us realize it. Thank you so much for your valuable time. And thanks to all the viewers for being a part of the webinar. And since we do not have any questions, so we'll wrap up. So thank you, everyone. It was a great session.